So welcome, Kim. Thank you for joining me. It's great to have somebody from Mentor, and it's great to have you. We've known each other for a little while, and I think you're terrific. I was looking forward to having a chat with you. Just so everybody knows, Kim, you are the Canadian director for Mentor Aesthetics, right?
Yes, exactly.
What is your official position?
So my official role, I look after the sales and marketing for the whole Canadian division for the Mentor portfolio, but I do work closely with my global partners. So our head office for Mentor would be situated in Irvine, California. And what I do from the Canadian point of view, I run the Mentor show for sales and both marketing and sales.
Yeah. How did you get involved with Mentor, Kim?
Well, try not to bore you, Dr. Yazdani, with all the details, but it was very interesting because I came to J&J about 18 years ago, came in through sales, and I was looking after women's health. So it was strictly urology and gynecology. I loved the specialist world. It was just a great fit that I had a national role there as well. So you really got a feel for what was happening across the country. Surgeons always love knowing, what are they doing in British Columbia? What are they doing in Alberta? So throughout J&J, it's a great place where you can move through different roles. I took on a number of different positions where they became a little bit more provincial based. And then when the Mentor portfolio came open, they knew I had a love for specialists and working in that one area. So they thought I might be a great candidate for the role. So 8 years ago, I applied to take over the Mentor portfolio. And part of my success was because of that whole area of the specialty, working with a close group of reps in one area. And breast recon and aesthetics was a perfect fit for me.
Yeah. So for people who don't know, Mentor is one of the two major companies that manufactures breast implants. And that's predominantly the business. It's a breast implantation company or breast implant company. And Mentor was purchased by Johnson & Johnson. When was that, Kim? That was in the early 2000s?
Yeah, actually, we purchased them about 12 years ago.
Yes. Oh, okay. So for some reason I thought it was early 2000s. It's kind of me losing track of time. So was it 2010? It must have been 2010 or 2008, something like that.
Yeah, exactly. And at that point, I wasn't involved with it at all. But we had acquired Mentor, and we had acquired it and brought it into our portfolio, into our world, which was definitely a bit of mayhem at the time.
So it's interesting because you were a part of Johnson & Johnson, and then you kind of moved into Mentor, which was kind of an aesthetics company, as opposed to some of the other executives that I've chatted with who are part of the aesthetics company, and then when they're purchased by the bigger company, then they move into a higher role. And I think that was the case with the previous CEO of Mentor, was it not? That she was a Mentor, kind of born and bred Mentor, and then moved into a J&J role.
Well, exactly. And it's funny because when we acquired Mentor, and this is just from what I can recollect, we brought everybody with us. So the whole Mentor division came with us through to J&J and stayed a lot of their same rules, but then tried to adjust to the new world of medical devices and corporate and everything else. Because at one point it was just a very small but mighty operation. And then when J&J took it over, it was really having to adjust their way of doing things, just because now we had, different protocols and processes that we had to follow, or that they had to follow at the time.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because I really enjoy, as I was telling you the other time we were chatting, I really do enjoy chatting with business executives, because you guys bring such a different perspective than medical types and medical people. but one of the interesting topics that I've really found fascinating chatting with executives has been culture and their business culture. And the idea that you have a company that has a certain culture and they're successful. Mentor has been very successful with breast implants. And then they're purchased by a bigger company that's new to that arena. And the worry is always, is the culture going to change? And I remember, actually, because I remember Mentor from pre Johnson Johnson purchasing them, and I had a lot of exposure with the various kind of reps and people that were affiliated with that company. It was always a great company, well run, and terrific kind of principled company. And then it was kind of a question of when there's a new company that comes in and they have their own new set of values, does that change, and has that changed? Do you think anything kind of changed? I know we're looking at 12 years ago, but can you think about?
It's interesting. I'm sure. So Rick Sherman was basically the GM for Mentor when they came over to J&J. And I don't know if you ever knew Rick Sherman. He was just a really lovely man, and really adjusted as well as he could to the J&J culture. And he actually ran the show for a few years as we tried to figure out the best way to amalgamate the two companies together. And I got to know him a little bit just because, as I said, he was a very likable, genuine person. So I would think he really went into it proactively. To give you an example of someone who said, okay, I'm going to embrace this change. I'm going to look at it positively. I think a lot of, some people who were no longer with Mentor had a harder time adjusting. Just because, the whole world of compliance had changed at that point, and things that you can do when you're a smaller company and expenditures that you can make with some of your customers and clients. You come into the J&J world, all that changes. So I think that was a little bit of a shift for everyone, and you had to look at business in a different way. Not bad, not great, but I'm sure some of the reps, it was a different way of having to go about their daily activities. Moving into J&J, we have a wonderful culture at J&J, and I always tell them they're going to have to get rid of me because I won't leave. I think it's just, J&J just stands for so many of the right things. They do the right thing, right? And whether I agree or disagree sometimes, I always know it's what's in the best interest of the patients, what's the healthcare practitioners. So I think once the Mentor employees shifted to learn a little bit more about our culture, I think it became easier to realize, wow, bigger company, you can do more, you can spend more on some of these other things that maybe when you're small, you just don't have access to.
Right. And when you mean, just to clarify, when you refer to compliance issues, I'll just kind of briefly say to our listeners, because I know people talk about this at all, and somebody who's foreign to the industry may not understand, but it really refers to how you interact with your clients, meaning like how you interact with hospitals or private clinics, how you do educational activities, how you organize your educational activities, the way that you organize all of those, and even things like funding of educational activities like resident research and resident events. There are strict rules about how that funding can happen, and it's changed over the past number of years, right? Like, it was far more lax even over a decade ago. But I think when you refer to compliance, you mean that following those rules has become far more difficult and has affected how companies interact with what they consider as their clients or their kind of end users.
I think it's a good way of looking. I think when you're a smaller company, and you probably even see it in some of the smaller aesthetics, that they can do things without having to go through this whole approval process a little quicker and easier than we can. Not that we don't eventually get there, but we have more of a stringent process that we follow just to make sure all the I's are dotted, all the T's are crossed. We're being fair. We're investing in the right areas. I think some of those things have been really excellent, because I can always pass the red face test whenever I'm talking to any of the surgeons to say, here's what we're doing, here's why we're doing it. And I think, before that, when I was a rep in the field, I could make, 12, 15 years ago, I could make decisions on my own, say, yeah, okay, let's just do that, not knowing what else was going on across the country. And I think with Mentor, before they came in as part of J&J, they could do a little bit more of that, right? They could, some of the stories I hear are I always think sound extremely fun, but, being able to go to baseball games and rent out the what do you call it, the box and stuff like that you could do a little bit more, where Where now, with the new structure and with J&J, none of that, unless, we don't do any of that anymore. We want to support education and, use of our product. How do we best teach that? Preceptorships, all of that, which is excellent. But it's a bit of a shift from how it used to be.
Yeah, right. And I guess the people who would criticize and it's not, this wasn't just a mentor issue. This was how the industry interacted with their end users, and it led people to really think of it kind of like an old boys club, right? Where people would make decisions based on who they liked, or really without having to answer, maybe not in a malicious way, but they just would make decisions that they didn't necessarily have to answer for. And now that process is far more regulated and regimented. And I know, because I deal with you guys, and if there's anything that has to be done on an educational basis, there's got to be a formal approval process, and there has to be merit to the request.
Exactly. And the nice thing, even for you and your colleagues, now, okay, well, there's the process, you know it's fair, that we're looking at all the different processes, so that when I respond back to say, hey, you know what, we just can't do it, here's why, it's not, there's not favoritism, there's none of that. It's strictly the process that we follow.
So can I go back to this J&J question? Because when I had a conversation with your previous CEO, they talked about this cradle, the J&J cradle, which is, I don't even really know how you would describe it, but is it like a Jerry Maguire type of document of purpose that you revisit periodically?
I guess with the credo, it's funny. It really is something that we live by. When you come in the front entrance of J&J, you'll see our credo hung on our wall. And it really it goes back, from when the two Johnson & Johnson brothers started out the company, is, our first and foremost priority is the patients and the healthcare providers. So when we make decisions, we go down that path. And now that's the Johnson & Johnson credo, but what happens is all the different franchises, like Mentor, for instance, we follow the credo, right? We follow how we treat employees and how we treat our surgeons and how we treat our patients. So, I mean, it's the guiding light a bit, but it really is, it really has held true. And it really even hasn't changed with everything in the world changing. Our credo has just been a really nice baseline for who we are and what we represent.
So is that something that internally you have to periodically revisit with your staff and you emphasize? And how do you do that? Is that just through retreats, or is it on a day-to-day basis, every decision has some kind of relevance to that credo?
So for both, for sure. So a lot of, it's very rare we'd sit and say, well, what would the credo say? But we do do credo surveys around the world. And we measure the results to say, are we living by what we say, by the different paragraphs that we break it down? And we get, every single person that's employed by J&J will respond to it. And then at the end, what we do is we do a presentation to each country. How were our credo results? Where can we do better? And if we can do better, we set goals and objectives to say, maybe we need to do more here on the innovation pillar, or maybe we need to do more here. So we get really a group's perspective. So for us, it would be our voice of customer almost.
Yeah. I just think it's really fascinating, because there is a strong relationship between the surgeons and end users and physicians and companies. There, in any area of medicine there is, but in plastic surgery and aesthetics, I think I would probably go out on a limb and say that that's a stronger relationship than almost any other subspecialty of medicine, because there is this element of there is a very strong relationship where we as the physicians are actually working closely with our industry partners to develop new products, to look at new techniques, and to evaluate products that are out there. And in a lot of areas of plastic surgery, we do lean on industry to provide more data than perhaps other areas of medicine. So it's a unique subspecialty of medicine where our relationship with industry is is, I think, like tighter than other areas of medicine. Would you agree? I mean,
Uh,
you've been in gynecology and women's health. Did you get that sense?
Completely agree because of the weight of the private sector with us as well. So, with the hospital setting, for sure, things get tendered out, decisions get made with the whole RFP process, which you're familiar with. In the private sector, we are way more engaged with the surgeons because it is your decision for your clinic what product you want to use. So there are things that you're going to consider that, you and I need to have conversations of what's important to you, right? Customer service, the customer experience piece, the product, the price. So all of that is you making your decisions for your clinic and your patients that I can work with you on that, right? Sometimes the hospital is maybe a bigger animal that it's harder. It's, once that tender goes out, once they pick that customer, away they go. Where with you and I, we can say, hey, this year I'm not going to do as many breast implants. I'm going to do more body. So, what do you have in your body portfolio that you can quote me on? So it's definitely a bit more personal, and I think it's a bit more individualized for sure.
It really is, and I guess where I was leading with this is that I was surprised starting these podcasts and talking to executives. I was pleasantly surprised, but I have to say I didn't really see it coming that so many executives of companies that I really respect, and by, to be honest, I'm only interviewing companies that I respect. So many executives, when we talk about culture, they really talk about these values and virtues that they kind of hammer home in their corporate culture. And it was really great to hear. And as an end kind of user and as kind of an outsider looking at these companies that I inherently like and I respect and I kind of have good relationships with the reps, it's nice to hear, and it almost makes sense that they do have these values. And they're almost like, I kind of jokingly, to my own residents, I call them the Sunday school virtues. They're kind of the virtues and values that you'd kind of teach your kids. You don't necessarily like being a truthful, honest, looking out for others, having kind of compassion, and these virtues that are really important, and being a decent human being that you don't necessarily. I guess I would never have thought that those would be qualities that would be kind of hammered home in a corporate setting, but they
Oh,
seem to be in a lot of the good companies.
oh, it's huge. I mean, it's so much so that sometimes because we're so strong with all of these qualities that we want to embrace, we might swing too far one way because we spend so much time, on our community involvement, our, the kindness factors, some of our diversity and inclusion initiatives that we do. We just want to have the best people educated and working in the company to really create that corporate culture. And they've done a great job because we talked about the credo and how we test it to make sure it's doing what it should be doing. But there are other things that we look at just to make sure that corporate culture is created in terms of workplace satisfaction and constantly looking at feedback from all different divisions. And we're under the medical device umbrella, but it also applies to our consumer partners and our pharmaceutical partners, that we're really trying to create this environment where people love to come to work.
Yeah, I mean, and it shows. I mean, to be honest, it shows. Like from my perspective, you certainly can see that in your dealing, or like my dealings with companies and their employees, as to who really truly has like vested interests and kind of a bond with their company. But can we kind of expand on that too? Because you are our industry is, one could argue this, like our end users or our clients are by and large women mostly. Yet on the corporate side of a lot of the companies that create products that we use, it's not predominantly women, it's predominantly men. So I love to see female executives who've really excelled in the aesthetics industry, and what your experience has been as a female executive, kind of working your way up this ladder.
Okay, sure. And it's funny because I was hoping we would talk a little bit about that today. And so I asked my colleagues for a few stats, just how are we doing on that whole woman in leadership perspective? And you'll be interested to know that women right now at J&J lead 80% of our science-based functional teams. So that's, that's a shift, right? Secondly, women hold nearly 45% of all science roles within Mentor. And lastly, more than 50% of the Mentor leadership team are women. So we really, if you looked at that, I'm sure 10 years ago, I'm sure we've doubled on every category. So it's always good to check just to see sort of what's happening from a global perspective and from head office.
Well, yeah, you're right. Because I would never have guessed that. If you asked me those questions and asked me to guess what the numbers were, particularly on the research side, I would have guessed, maybe flip those numbers around. I would have guessed it'd be on the 20, closer to the 20 rather than the 80.
Dr. Yazdani, me too. And it's funny because when I got these numbers today, I sent them to my whole team because I think it's a great, just for them to know, right? I know, the question always gets asked. J&J sometimes often gets thought of, how are we represented from a female perspective in the leadership role? So that was interesting. And majority of the reps have replied back saying, wow, I did not know that. So it's information we need to share more, I think.
Yeah, you really do. If people don't know it, you really do need to share that, because that's a great statistic, especially in an industry that really is predominantly the customers are women, and so let's build on that point. So from your perspective, what do you think that you've had have you had challenges that perhaps some of your male colleagues wouldn't have had, or are you saying that Mentor's so great that you've really, it's been an easy transition?
I would say so. I went back 5 years ago to do my MBA, right? So that was number one, just to give me a bit.
And your background, Kim, is nursing, right? So
social science degree, went on into nursing, but never nursed. So I know that always seems funny, but I went right away after my nursing stint to occupational health and safety, but went into the sales and marketing side. So I have background for sure in understanding things, but no real active bedside nursing skills. So if you get sick, you do not want me at your side, put it that way. Nor does my husband.
You're not going to get redeployed during COVID. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's it. That's exactly it. But what's interesting, so when I went back to do my MBA, and it was more just, I had been in sales management position for a number of years, but just wanted that edge, right? Wanted that new shift to digital, to, social networking, all those things that, as a woman now who's 50, it just things that I needed to brush up on. It was great. I have to say, for me in a leadership role, it really did help me move into Mentor with the right skills that I needed to work with all of the different private clinics, to help be more involved in tender processes and financial summaries and all of that. So from that end, and J&J was extremely supportive of that. So I think if I hadn't have done that, there might have been a bit of a gap and a few more challenges for me. Especially, as I said, because a lot of times we are doing business case scenarios with the private sectors where we're helping create value propositions and everything else, working with our clients and our customers. Prior to that, women in a leadership position, when I first got into a sales management role, I would have been one of the very few females sitting around the table. Majority were male. And myself and my other female colleague, we would always get into a meeting initially and count, just to count, what's the ratio in our head, right? And these little texts would come across. That's really shifted now. So that, at one point, if it was, 2 females and 20 males, you're really seeing now it's definitely more evenly distributed. And I also think it's just, for several reasons. It's a choice that a male or female have to make to take on a bigger career, right? The time, you're away from family. If you're traveling, there are a lot of opportunities that are amazing, but some people don't look at it like that. And often, and it's changed it drastically, but 15 years ago or 20 years ago, it wasn't always the female that would want to take on that 60 to 80 hour work week. Which it is, right? We work hard, right? We travel, and you have to embrace that and have to have a support system. So for me personally, I had a great support system. So I have a partner who is, 50-50. There's no thinking, hey, that's your job or my job. And I also had two parents who live locally who were there when I was traveling to have the kids stay overnight and everything else. So those factors, I think, are what really helped make my role possible.
So do you think that companies need to go out of their way to make the environment a little bit more friendly for female executives, or do you think it's naturally just kind of moving in that direction as someone who's succeeded?
Yeah, I think both. I think now what's happened with COVID, it's made it really possible for virtual communication, meetings. So I don't think that expectation is that we all have to be in the office 8 a.m. till 6 p.m. every day driving to market. And I think the company's now saying, "Hey, we get it. We don't think so either." If you had asked me 5 years ago, I would have said, "Yeah, I want everybody in the office. I want to have meetings around the boardroom." It was always I just liked everybody being in person, being there, being engaged. I tell you, the last year and a half, you can definitely have great meetings like this, like we're doing. It'd be much better to be in person doing it, but this definitely will suffice.
Do you think this will continue on? Will you guys go back to having more in person, or do you think you'll continue on with having more virtual interactions?
I think I'm going to really pick carefully what I can do virtually and what I think we still need to do in person. You do miss the human touch in person. I love, there's nothing I love more than having meetings and getting caught up and, meeting for coffees or meeting for dinner. I think you really develop strong relationships like that. People get to know each other a bit more personally. When we're doing these meetings and Zoom calls, we put our 30 or 60 minutes in, we get right to the business. So you do miss that interaction a little bit. I don't want to say you miss the fun, but there's something about team building and bonding that when we're together, and if we have a conference and we have all the reps across Canada come to a conference, we really help build a team, a better team that love working with each other. Zoom, yeah, it works, but it doesn't work all the time. Would you agree, like with the residents and things like that? Are you finding maybe a little bit the same in your area?
Yeah, I mean, when it started, like a year ago when we moved everything to virtual, and I think it opened people's eyes that you could do a lot of these things, and I think it really expanded on it expanded on people's interest in having educational activities, actually, because now you could do more. Like you could actually go to more conferences because they were virtual. You didn't have to take, a week off of work and travel and be away from your family and be in a hotel. Or if you were going to go do an evening event, you could literally do that evening event from your office and beside your bedroom and spend an hour and then be back at doing whatever it is at home, as opposed to you're done for the night and you're gone and you're not going to see your kids and you come back. So I think that part of it was has certainly been great. And part of me thinks that won't change. I think it's fantastic that we have moved towards virtual meetings in like education, for instance, because now I can participate in a European conference without having to go to Europe, and I don't have to necessarily worry about taking so many days off work or being away from home. I can go to I can participate in conferences that are easier to get to, and I think many people will feel that way. I do agree with you that there's an element of being zoomed out, though. And I think it is not going to be ever as good as being in person and talking to people in person. And part of that is forming relationships whereas now we're kind of chatting on Zoom, but if we were beside each other, we do the same chat, but then when the camera's off, we're kind of really getting to know each other even more so. So there is that part of it, I think we still do miss.
Yeah, Dr. Yazdani, you're right. And it's funny because today I had a CSPS call. So for those who don't know, it's the Canadian Society of Plastic Surgery, that they're doing virtual meeting now. So we were all supposed to be in Whistler in June. And that's always a great way to see a number of different healthcare practitioners from across the country. And so this year they've decided just due to everything else, it's going to be a virtual meeting. And again, I don't know from our end, from a company perspective, how great that will be, right? That you'll come in, you'll enter into my booth virtually. I'll have to let you know, part 2 of our series, we can talk about it, because I'm just not sure after seeing the call today, does this work, or I don't know.
Well, that's a good point. So for people who don't know, a lot of our educational conferences are supported financially by industry partners. But in the past, you'd go to a conference and there'd be an area where there'd be booths, and participants would be encouraged to interact with the industry so that you can kind of see what those industry partners have brought to the conference, what new products they're showing, and it encourages kind of them to be involved. Now you're right. You're probably going to go into some breakout room, and I'm not sure how you have a conversation with
Me
somebody
neither.
in a
Me
breakout
neither.
room if you don't know them and
I'm
they're just
super curious. I was thinking, he was showing me today, and I'm like, really? How many people are going to want to have a live chat with me? But hey, I may be wrong, right? So I'll be curious to see.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, it'll be interesting to kind of, yeah, I don't know. But on the flip side, there may be other things like I think the whole webinar market has exploded. Like I don't know that there's a day that goes by that I'm not invited to multiple webinars, and that's great. Like the webinar kind of industry is booming. I've given webinars, and it's kind of weird. It's definitely weird giving a webinar as opposed to giving an in-person lecture, an in-person talk, where you kind of, it's almost like you're talking into a vacuum or into a black hole. There's very little, sensory feedback you get when you're giving a webinar, and you kind of are just talking, and maybe depending on how many people are in the webinar, maybe somebody writes a question in the kind of chat comment and you can see their question, but by and large, you're not looking at faces, you're not hearing people, you're not, there's not this physical feedback of, are you doing a good job? Is somebody interested? Should you go in a different direction? It's like you're sitting in a closet with the lights off and you're just talking to yourself. It's a very weird feeling.
100%. On top of can you hear me? Am I sharing my slides with you? Like, if I hear these lines,
yeah, because you get no feedback. That's what I mean. It's like a sensory deprivation thing. You have no feedback, and you don't even know if your internet got disconnected. At some point, I may have been disconnected, and I could just be talking to myself here, and I don't know.
Well, and forget about trying to be funny, because you don't get any response. Like, so you think you've said something funny, but you're like, wait, maybe, so, and I always think I'm funnier than I am, as many people tell me. So that's even worse, because now, you just sit there like quietly thinking, oh gosh, nobody understood that.
Yeah, that's right. It's the mental tumbleweed that's just kind of rolling across the floor after you say something.
Yes.
Yeah, so I agree. I don't know. That's a very weird thing. But on the other hand, like, it opens up the whole webinar thing to people that wouldn't have ever been a part of it before.
Listen, it'll be interesting to see the attendance that they get. And then, what I've also found is you can get some really good keynote speakers now that aren't having to fly in. So to your point, some sessions that you might not have attended before because you just couldn't get there, now they're bringing them to you. It's fantastic.
Yeah, there's definitely pros and cons. I don't think it'll go away, but there'll have to be some kind of merging of in-person and virtual. But I don't get a sense it's going to go away anytime soon anyway.
I would think that, when we look at we have this return to work committee of when everybody's going to go back to the office. And, at one point last year, it was, okay, we're going to be back in July, and then we're going to be back in October. Once they've stopped saying it, because, most likely, like you said, it's no different than, when they'll be on a plane next time.
Yeah, I know. So since we're naturally essentially talking about COVID, do you know much about this J&J vaccine that's being released?
I so wish I did. I wish I knew more. I don't know much, but I was thinking, I thought you would ask me that for sure. And at some point, if one of your next series, and if your audience is interested, I could see if I could get, one of the medical directors who's involved with that to come on to a podcast, which might be interesting, right? Just to see, all I know is what I'm probably reading the same as you're reading is it's exciting that it's one shot. I think there's a lot of benefits to some of that. So I think it will most likely do very well. I just don't know enough about it.
Yeah, we just got to put the the gas pedal down and kind of get it out fast. That's the biggest thing. Get it. And the one shot vaccine is really great. It means more people are going to get access to it and be fully vaccinated without having to worry about the 2 shots. But
It's true. We have a general manager who's excellent as well, but he'll do a town hall. And one of the first questions on every one of his town halls is, when can we get our J&J vaccine, right? So we always laugh because we just want them to open up the doors, let us go in, get the vaccine and be gone, but no such luck for us.
yeah. So tell me about the breast implant market. Can we talk a little bit about that? Mentor
Yes.
is primarily a breast implant company, and it's unique because that's really all you do.
Yeah, but we do focus on the aesthetic and the recon, so the breast augmentation, reconstruction. But we also have a body line with the micro system for liposuction that you're familiar with as well.
Yeah, that's a terrific power assisted liposuction machine. But so implants, what is new with implants? What is I've kind of had this chat with one of my guests who was a clinician last year, how really implants are implants. The technology has changed, but at the end of the day, they've kind of stayed the same in principle for decades. So when you look at R&D and what's next and where you guys are headed with implants, what do you decide? What is new? What's going to be something that you focus on, and what's new to the market?
I mean, I think right now when we look at, number one is surgeon feedback. So we'll look at, how do you think our current portfolio looks like? And are there gaps that you see? And if there are gaps, for something new products that we're going to be looking at, we want to make sure that we filled all those gaps for you on our current existing products. So whether that be certain sizes or, the saline implant, if there are things. So voice of customer will always kind of help us figure out, next direction. Again, we always look for patient needs first. So however we can support the customers and the healthcare systems is always the next area that we're conscious of to make sure we're meeting the patient's needs first. Implant wise, I think, like you said, we've come along, salines at one point were a really big part of our portfolio. I think many still use salines. Very interesting. A lot of surgeons and patients still love the saline implants. I think gels have become more popular. If you look at what's the direction, gels definitely has taken more of a first place with patient selection, especially in Canada. That may not be around the world.
Well, what do you think the percentage is? I mean, I can just tell you from my own personal experience that it is really rare for a woman to ask for saline implants. I used to tell people it was kind of 9 out of every 10 patients wanted a gel implant. Now it's like 99 out of 100. What are you finding from the sales perspective? What are those numbers?
Go back to maybe your 9 out of 10 or your 8 out of 10. And it's, it's just different reasons why certain patients might prefer a saline. And then I guess from your end, if a patient said, no, I really want a saline, you'd be like, okay, no problem. We'll get you a saline, correct? You might would you ask her why, tell me why the saline appeals to you right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I ask them specifically, and I find that the people who come in wanting saline they're not people that are coming in without a preconceived idea and then deciding on the spot with my help. The people who want saline have already decided when they've come to see me that they want a saline for for any number of reasons, and most often it's just really kind of their perception of safety profile of the devices. And there's really not that I try to change their mind. I really don't. That's not the way that I approach my consultations, but I'm just saying I couldn't change their mind even if I tried to. I mean, those are kind of, but everybody else has geared towards gels. And really, if you took, I don't know, if you took 10 patients and you put them in a room and asked them here's the pros and cons, in my experience, I'm not seeing any of those types of patients on their own when they come in without a bias choosing saline. They're all choosing gel.
Yeah. What's interesting is even when I've asked that question with some of your colleagues too, they'll indicate if someone had a friend who had a saline and the results were good and they look good, that will also be an indicator why they may come in and want a saline themselves. That word of mouth, right? But
I don't know if I mean, that's not my experience, because nowadays, especially with social media, like, yes, maybe somebody has a friend who had one experience, but then they're on social media and they're looking at like hundreds of people
yes,
who
yes,
have
true, true. That's a very good point.
who have their own experience, but also very strong opinions, and they're very influenced by what they find on social media more
Yeah, I
than
think that's
more
a really
more
good
than
point.
but yeah, I just, I don't know. So when again, back to this question of what's next. I mean, what are you guys looking as being kind of the next development in implants?
So from an implant perspective, I think right now, it's hard to talk about some of the pipeline because it's
Oh,
tough to
come
talk
on,
about.
Kim, you can talk about it.
Yeah, it'll just be between us, right?
Yeah, it's just between friends, just me and you. No one else is listening.
But I know if you look at sort of, where does, mentors are always looking for, how do we add to our current portfolio to actually complement the aesthetic business? And, for me in Canada, having the microware that we can distribute as part of our portfolio, that's what I'm looking at to say, are there other things that I could be adding to our portfolio that we could be offering you in the private setting that will complement your breast augmentation procedures? So if I can start looking at some of those, because being a distributor for certain product lines, I think why not, if we know obviously they've made all the standards, they're Health Canada approved. We've got surgeon feedback. I always look to yourself or your colleagues to say, hey, am I missing? Is there something that you've seen at a conference that you think is wonderful? You and I spoke a little bit about the biosimulation, stuff like that. Those areas that maybe we should be exploring further. And I would say, for sure, all of that is being explored. And feedback that I think works here in Canada. Like my partnership with my career, I'll share with my U.S. partners to say, hey, this is a good product. We're having great success. So I think that's what we'll look at. Always wanting to grow, always wanting to serve more patients globally, for sure. If we can, will be our goals and objectives.
Will you ever get into areas that are non-breast related, like face products, facial aesthetics, or?
I mean, from a personal perspective, I really hope so, right? I think we've got such a great sales division, sales team that if we can add more and bring more to the private sector, to the plastic surgeon, I'm really hoping so. And I think with J&J, the one great thing about J&J, they're always looking for, as I said, better ways to serve the healthcare practitioners and the patients. So, you look at some of the acquisitions J&J have made across the board in years, they always want to grow. And so I would think Mentor would be no different.
Right. And you, what are your goals? Where are you headed, Kim?
Where am I headed? That's a great question. I feel like I'm talking to my manager, who will say, so where do you see yourself in 3 to 5 years? You know what? I'm really, like, if the reps listen to this, they're going to go, here she goes. But I'm really enjoying the Mentor portfolio. I love the fact that we've been able to build some really great relationships with surgeons throughout the past several years. So I would hope that globally we've got this management board from a global perspective that we work closely with. I'm hoping that we can do more of that me personally can do more of that, working with some of the other countries, finding out what they're doing that's different or unique that I can bring to Canada. If you ask me in the next 2 or 3 years, that's what I'm hoping. If they've done certain programs that's worked extremely well, I would look at sort of saying, okay, well, why don't I see if that would fit in the Canadian marketplace, tied into the plastic surgery world.
And what about you? You have a website that patients can access. That's a great website for breast surgery education, but it's only available in the States. Is that correct?
No, so that's a good question. Thanks. We have now Canadianized it. So we have and I'll send you the link and everything, but we've got it now where it's Canadian information that we are patients are allowed to go, are allowed, they're able to go on, take a look at it, surgeons as well. And effective in the next week or two, we're starting our Instagram campaign, which will also be new to the Canadian digital space for us. But we're really excited about it. We think we're just trying to reach more people, and social media is definitely the platform to do that.
Right. But the website, I think your previous leadership had told me that the website had an ability to do virtual sizing, and patients could do some kind of virtual pictures onto that website itself. We just never had access to that in Canada. Am I correct? Is that?
I think you are correct. I think the US, we're looking at doing one that had a bit more that you could actually go right in. And ideally, that will be our goal in Canada, to get to that same point. Our first part was just, let's launch it. Let's get all the relevant information from a Canadian perspective. And then I think part two of that, with our marketing manager, Elizabeth Cole, she'll look at taking that and saying, okay, what's working extremely well on the US website that we can actually take from them and add to ours.
Yeah, it's a weird thing when there's US websites and Canadian websites where you can't cross over because of the territory you're in. I never quite understood why that's the case, particularly because the internet's really a global open village, and to kind of have these kind of geographical boundaries in the digital world really seems odd to me, doesn't it, to you?
They've gotten so much better now of just, sharing, and we're all involved in those initial meetings. So the great news is, it used to be like that. It's really shifted now, that if we're developing something, we're all at the table and we're all looking at, okay, this is the only difference would be the Canadian healthcare system might be a little bit different. So, okay, well, explain that. What does that look like? So at the end of the day, the content will all be consistently the same. There just might be those few country tweaks of what we can do that's a little bit different than what the US could do or China could do, etc.
Right. Okay, Kim, I ask everybody this question. What is the one issue in the world that is most important to you? I'm not talking about medical. I just mean kind of global issue that really kind of strikes deep in your heart.
I think COVID has shaken me up a little bit. I think this whole, if you had asked a year and a half ago that we'd all be shut down in a pandemic, I never would have believed it. And I think just now, people getting immunized as quickly as possible is something I'm more passionate about. Follow the rules right now. Wear a mask. Respect some of the policies that have been set. So I think that right now would be, if you ask me, what am I passionate about? I'm passionate about that, just to make sure people are safe. Parents, my grandparents, and it's just been really in Ontario specifically right now. It's been we've been hit, and so I just want to get this cleared up as quickly as possible, so that we can resume, back to, if we want to travel or we want to have Christmases together or special events together.
Yeah, well said. Well, Kim, thanks so much. You're terrific. I think Mentor Canada is really lucky to have you kind of leading the charge, and I really look forward to seeing where you head in the future.
Well, Dr. Yazdani, I think for sure you are terrific, and I think you've got your second gig now. When you decide you're going to get out of plastic surgery, I can't think of a better person. You're just you're a natural. So you make it easy for me. So really, I think you've got a great thing going here.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. Okay, take care, Kim.
Thanks so much. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.